A 2004 paper in the Journal of Wind Engineering and Industrial Aeronautics showed that snow moves through air very similar to how crushed walnut shells moves through running water at a smaller scale. This information is perhaps only useful if you are an engineer designing roofs, wanting to know how snow is going to drift on them and if their geometry will cause drifts that might create a weight unbearable by the roof and cause it to collapse. But perhaps the strangest thing about this phenomenon is the fact that I have known about it since before 2004. Specifically, I visited a friend who worked in a lab, and one of her jobs was to take wooden model roofs and put a thin coat of crushed walnut shells on them, and then lower them down into a flume, which is a device that specifically regulates the speed and flow of water through a chamber, and then run the water over the model, and then measure all of the different places on the roof and how much walnut shell remained in that location or was swept off or collected. This experiment solidified for me the idea of what engineering is and what it is not. It's perhaps too black and white a definition, but I am sure that I am not an engineer. That assessment runs contrary to basically every professional title that I have ever held. I've been a software engineer, a senior software engineer, a customer solutions engineer, a manager of engineers. And yet, that title has always sat a little funny with me. To me, engineering is about math, formulas, precision, measurements, and tolerances. It's about not only knowing if a particular bolt will break under a certain load, but knowing exactly how much force and what types of force is required to shear the bolt and all of the tolerances surrounding it. It is the ability to know what vibration and frequencies will turn a bridge into a bowl of jello. I think we all take for granted how certain engineering is. And I really put engineering on a pedestal for that precision and certainty in a way that I do not similarly put programming. I think there are two factors that separate programming, coding, software engineering, whatever you want to call it, from an engineering discipline in my eyes. The first is its relative youth. Engineering has been around since the dawn of time. We have been able to use and study the screw since the ancient Greeks 5,000 years ago. I expect when humanity is looking back at programming 5,000 years from now, they're going to regard it very differently than we do today. There will be far more right answers, certainties, and tolerances than there are today. The second, though, is our general acceptance of the faults of software. We are very forgiving of Photoshop crashing in a way that we would be much less forgiving of, say, the wing falling off of a plane due to forces exceeding what its tolerances were. And to be clear, this is not to say that there is no programming that does not meet a bar that is engineering-esque. As an example, the autopilot system that basically flies modern planes is incredibly redundant and reliable in a way that Photoshop is not. But I think my point is that in the same way that screwing two 2x4s together does not make me an engineer, I think that simply coding or programming does not innately make someone a software engineer. Good news, though. I don't have to worry about ill-fitting titles anymore. I can label myself an internet hobo and digitally jump from train car to train car until my heart's content. Except, not really. This journey of video making has only just begun, and I'm already starting to be bombarded by the nomenclatural nuances of what people call themselves and what titles they ascribe to themselves. I'll link the article below, but it's come to my attention that creator may be the new engineer in my life. It's an analogy that doesn't quite hold water, and an engineer with a background in fluid dynamics could probably explain why, but I'm going to do my best to muddle through anyways. The divide raised by the article is the divide between creator and influencer. Specifically, in March of this year, the UK Parliament set out to try to understand what they called influencer culture. I am not going to attempt to define influencer culture, but the article brought up some interesting baggage that comes along with these terms that really resonated with me and was very reminiscent of the inner conflict that I experienced around being labeled a software engineer. In my first video, and a bunch of times since then, you can find me romanticizing the idea of creation. The fact that this channel is not so much about trying to create a massive, successful audience or surf the latest waves on YouTube, but is really about a learning experience for me. The ability for me to learn how to create videos, how to edit them, how to create graphics within those videos. And I stand by that, but notably, I have consistently used create or creator as a way to indicate what I think the value of the action is. The creation of these videos is something that I ascribe a great deal of meaning and importance to. What I didn't know prior to reading the article is that creator, and specifically content creator, is a very clever piece of branding that was gifted to all of us by YouTube when referring to the people on the YouTube platform who made content for YouTube. The article goes on to point out that the word creator comes with some really positive connotations. A creator is someone who is regarded for the artistry of the thing that they are crafting. And that is a stark contrast to the term influencer, which is often ascribed to a more monetary endeavor, trying to encourage people to make a purchasing decision or consume something of value. The article also points out that influencer is a term that basically no one self-applies. No one kind of raises their hand and says, "Hi, I'm an influencer." And instead, it's generally a pejorative term that is thrown around to describe people in a harsh light for their kind of feeding the flame of the consumerist economy. The article also points out that that term is not applied evenly, and often women are referred to as influencers more than men are. Not cool, society. I found this inequity eye-opening. I think that there's an incredible amount of power in titles, as evidenced by the title inflation that exists in the entire sales world. But titles can clearly be used to elevate people or to hold people back. Everyone who has a title is attempting to paint themselves in a certain light and establish a brand for themselves. And the power of titles cuts both ways. Lobbyist is a really nice term for someone who is essentially a professional briber with a laser-focused agenda. But it seems that if you do anything, it is likely that you will have to choose a title that describes what it is you do, if nothing else for convenience, so that at parties you can say, yeah, I'm a fill in the blank. But secondly, titles are also something that are applied to us in a way that is designed to put us into a certain box and sometimes hold us there. It's been an important thing for me to consider, but not something that's going to become all-encompassing. I don't really care what my title is. I think that my focus is going to continue being on the act of creation, and the emphasis here is on the act. I want to focus on the doing and the value that I derive from doing what it is I am doing, instead of getting bogged down by exactly which box I fit into and exactly how I like to describe myself. But for now, I just thought that this was interesting. I think that the titles and the ways that we refer to ourselves all throughout the professional space are fascinating, and I learned a bit from that article that added a new nuance to that. So for now, thank you as always for listening. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Not apotamus. Ponderous.